Good evening. I'm Dan Jennings. In the first 4 parts of our series on immigrations and customs enforcement, we have reported on the history of the agencies making up ICE, as well as the human rights violations being committed by that agency. Tonight, we will focus on current policy and what, if anything, can be done. The lack of oversight is simply astonishing. Beyond the misconduct detailed by the CRCL documents, which are shocking for the independent reason that they do not contain any evidence of disciplinary action or any other meaningful accountability for the abuse perpetrated by CBP officials. Rather, the records indicate at best cursory investigations. The trouble is neither the CRCL nor the Office of the Inspector General has the authority to do much more than issue policy recommendations. This is even though CRCL is authorized to conduct civil rights investigations. However, it has no power to discipline or to prosecute individual officials, or to provide any wronged individual as a remedy for a substantiated civil rights claim. Under the VCAA, CRCL, and the OIG, they should be reporting alleged child abuse out of DHS to the FBI. This is a law, and it's a law that they regularly ignore. There's no indication on the basis of these documents that this has been done on any sort of regular basis. The CRCL documents reveal an inappropriate reliance on CBP records and personnel's accounts in what are supposed to be independent investigations. Indeed, rather than independently investigate complaints of abuse, CRCL refers these complaints back to the CBP, the very entity accused of the misconduct. So they're telling them to investigate themselves for misconduct. Does anybody really believe that that's going to accomplish anything? That's like handing the wolf the keys to the hen house and expecting him to self-police. It's not going to happen. They don't resolve standard complaint closure recommendation forms appear repeatedly through the CRCL document production. This simple form includes a summary of the submitted complaint and a checklist of standard reasons why the complaint should be closed, such as insufficient information to investigate and allegations unfounded. I don't see anywhere here where there's a checklist of standard reason why the complaint should be investigated. Interesting. Troublingly, though, the documents indicate that CBP itself fails to timely respond to the oversight agency's request for additional information about specific complaints. And finally, these documents indicate that the agency may lack sufficient resources to handle the volume of complaints received. Some CRCL staff seem so fatigued from accounts of abuse that they appear reluctant to open new investigations. And now, the Trump administration is granting ICE the ability to destroy the records related to these abuses of migrant children. Now, granted, while these atrocities cannot solely be laid at the feet of the current administration, the fact is that with a racist who kept copies of Hitler's diaries on his nightstand, occupying the presidency, fueling the fires of xenophobia and racism, calling white supremacists good people, while calling Mexican rapists and Muslims terrorists, and suggesting a Mexican judge would be biased in a case against him, calling immigrants, children's future criminals, and indeed even animals. With new policies in place, such as separating children from their parents, while with no tracking policy procedures in place for ease of reunification, such as was in the case of Esteban Pastor, who had mortgaged his land in Guatemala to fund his sick toddler's hospital stay. He needed to work in the United States to pay off the loan. Instead, agents imprisoned the 28-year-old in July for coming back into the country after having been deported. Okay, granted, I know what the conservatives out there are going to say. Well, he shouldn't have come back into the country. What part of illegal don't you get? I have a question for the conservatives. What part of compassion? What part of humanity? And for you evangelicals out there, what part of the gospel are you forgetting? They then placed his child, a toddler, in a federal shelter. Now remember, this toddler had an extended hospital stay. So he wasn't in the best of health. And what did we do? We threw him in a federal shelter. That's what we did. 3 months later in October, the father was deported. Alone. When he asked agents where his child might be, the only answer they could give him was somewhere in Texas. That kind of supports the idea, although some people are trying to deny it, that we've lost track of numerous children. With such a policy being used by the president in an attempt to score points with his white supremacist base, yes, I said it, white supremacist base. Let's call a Nazi a Nazi. Mainstream media, CNN, all you others, let's call a liar a liar. And right now, I am going to call you all out and say that every one of you at the press conferences that Sarah Sanders gives, who sits there and allows her to spew these lies and does not stand up and either walk out or call her a liar. Screw the falsehoods. Screw the alternative facts. These are lies, and they deserve to be called such. And the American people deserve to hear such. Grow some balls. He attempts to score points with his base through these blatant lies as to whose policy this truly is, trying to blame the Democrats for it when it's not the Democrats. This is a new policy put in place by a racist attorney general. These are policies reminiscent of 1930s Germany, where they separated Jewish children from their parents before sending them to the ovens and putting them in encampments. Sorry, need to calm down for a second. With agency heads such as Stephen Wagner, a top official with the Department of Health and Human Services, testifying recently to Congress that between October and December of 2017, his office reached out to 7,635 unaccompanied children to check on them. Mostly through phone calls or mails. Not many through person-to-person visits. But the ORR was unable to determine with certainty the whereabouts of 1,475 children. I'm just curious as to how long it would take his agency, with all the agents that they have, to do a more thorough check on these children. Get the local police involved, sheriffs, state police. There's no reason for it. There's no reason that they cannot verify the whereabouts of these children. Wagner testified an additional 28 had run away. Well, sure, they know that. People, that is more than 19% of the children placed by ORR that are unaccounted for. 19%. Now, tomorrow, if one of our school districts came up missing 19% of their students, there'd be hell to pay, and we all know it. Wagner, however, said HHS is not responsible for the children. Mr. Wagner, I have a question. If not, then who? With people such as Education Secretary Betsy DeVos, who last week said that it's up to individual schools to decide whether to call U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement if they suspect students are undocumented, which, by the way, would run counter to the Supreme Court's 1982 ruling in Plyler versus Doe that granted the rights of students to receive a public education regardless of their immigration status. Let's be clear here. Any school that reports a child to ICE would violate the Constitution, but for this administration to know this, they would need to have actually read the Constitution. At least read parts other than the Second Amendment. Oh, wait, that's right. They haven't fully read that too, or they would know the part about a well-regulated militia. Oh, by the way, on that note, please go and look at our report also on gun violence in America. You'll find that very enlightening also. If the administration, Betsy DeVos, the Department of Education, actually did this, they'd be in violation of the Constitution. What's worse is the United States is clearly in violation of the Convention on the Rights of the Child, adopted and open for signature ratification and accession by the General Assembly Resolution of November 20th, 1989. Disgustingly, the United States remains the only member of the UN not to ratify this resolution. Now, we're talking since 1989, people. There's been a lot of administrations and Congresses in the last 29 years. 29 years we have had to ratify a document that is solely in place to guarantee the rights and protections of children that are attempting to migrate. And we don't sign it. Not since Andrew Jackson's Indian Removal Act of the 1830s has America seen such moral depravity by an American president. And with the nationalists, screw it, racists in the White House, and excuse my language, and their enablers in Congress, there is little hope for a resolution to these problems anytime soon. We here at the report urge you not only to contact your representatives, not only to bury ICE under a deluge of calls at 866-347-2423. That's 866-347-2423. But to also bury them under texts and emails. Because we remind you that if we, the people, do not get to the polls, if we do not help the disenfranchised amongst us to get to the polls, these horrendous human rights violations will not change. Because this is no longer the home of the free and the brave. And Lady Liberty must be crying at what we have become. We would like to thank the ACLU, the Washington Post, The Hill, CNN, and yes, as much as it disgusts me, even Fox News, for information that was used in this series. For everyone here at Equal Vote Local, we implore you, don't just comment, act. Good night, everybody.